Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed this free clip of aggressive progressives on the Young Turks. This is just a preview of what you will receive with TYT membership. That means exclusive interviews, panel discussions, and more of Jimmy, and of course, me. Check out this next clip, and if you like what you see, you can access full episodes of Aggressive Progressives by becoming a member. Head to tyt.com/join now.
We have Aaron Maté on the line with us. Aaron Maté is here. Hi, Aaron, are you there?
Hi, Jimmy.
Aaron, you've been doing great work on this in the nation, and you've caused a lot of controversy just by asking people who are making extraordinary claims about Russia collusion with Trump's campaign. You're asking them for evidence, and that has ruffled a lot of feathers. In fact, I even saw you got hung up on in one of your interviews, two of your interviews. One with Luke Harding, who just got humiliated for launching that bogus story in The Guardian that said Manafort visited Julian Assange 3 times, although nobody has a picture of it. The most surveilled building in the world, nobody has a picture of it. And then people on the left also reported that story and never debunked it, never went back and corrected it. So here we are. And then Jim Risen, who did great work during the Bush administration and Obama administration, now going along completely evidence fact-free, completely just making assertions about treason that he knows aren't true, and he does it anyway. This Russiagate and Trump has been the undoing of a lot of great journalists. Have you experienced that, Aaron?
Yeah, I agree. People whose work I really respect have unfortunately drunk the Kool-Aid. And either you're in the cult, as you talked about, Jimmy, or you're not. And I'm thankful that there are still a few of us who are not in the cult.
So what? Now you were on. I saw a video of you before Mueller came out and denied this latest story in Buzzfeed. You already were debunked. You were already skeptical of it. You already had questions about it. I saw you. I mean, that's a big move for you to do that, and you were correct. And so, what was it that made you suspicious of this Buzzfeed story in the first place?
There were so many reasons to doubt it. First of all, I mean, where can I start? Let's take the motive, okay? So, if Trump were to have directed Cohen to lie to Congress, okay, which is an impeachable offense, then he would have been risking impeachment by telling Cohen to lie about a deal that never happened and never got anywhere close to happening. All that happened basically was Trump signed a letter of intent in 2015. Cohen and his associate at the Trump Organization, Felix Sater, took charge of it. And for all this talk about negotiations going on and negotiations that Trump wanted to cover up, what that really amounts to is basically Cohen and Felix Sater fighting with each other because Sater kept promising him meetings and financing from the Russians, but it never came. And so, Cohen took matters into his own hands. He wrote a general Kremlin press address because he didn't even know who to contact. He asked for help. Somebody called him back and said, "Sorry, we can't help you." And that's pretty much the story. And so just on the surface,
so let me wait a minute, Aaron. Let me just clarify this for people who aren't that familiar with the story because it's been misreported so badly.
Yeah.
So there's this deal that they want to get done. They want to build a Trump Tower in Moscow.
Yeah.
Cohen and Sater, they can't get anything done. So Sater can't get nothing's happened. There's no movement happening on this. So Cohen decides to send an email to the Kremlin, right? And basically it's at info@kremlin.gov. That's basically what he does. He sends literally sends an email to that. And then he gets a phone call from somebody there, somebody who reads those info@kremlin.org. Somebody who reads those calls him back and says, "Not interested in the deal, thanks. But we do have this public real estate seminar happening in a few months if you'd like to attend that." That's the whole deal, right?
Exactly, and the negotiations are, Cohen and Sater fighting with each other. I'll read you a couple of examples. So on December 30th, 2015, Cohen writes to Sater, "I will not let you my job and playing point person. Not you or anyone you know will embarrass me in front of Mr. T when he asks me what is happening." And then he writes the next day, he writes, "You were putting my job in jeopardy and making me look incompetent. I gave you 2 months and the best you send me is some garbage invite by some no-name clerk at a third-tier bank." Okay, so and he's talking about the third-tier bank refers to this Russian bank that Sater got on board, but in like a non-binding way. So basically, like that's the extent of this deal that we're supposed to believe Trump really wanted to cover up. And they say that Trump denied having business deals with Russia when he was on the campaign trail, and it's taken that means Trump was covering this up. But yeah, I mean, Trump might have been playing loose with the truth, but it's also possible that given the fact that this deal went absolutely nowhere, and it was basically just like Felix Sater and Cohen trying to get it off the ground, talking about it and talking to Trump about it sometimes, then it's not that far from the truth to say that I have no business in Russia, because literally at that time that he had no business in Russia. They were talking about trying to build this hotel, but I'm sure they talk about building things in many places. Does that mean they have business everywhere where they're discussing their ideas for a project? So the motive here made no sense. Then there was the fact that BuzzFeed claimed that Mueller was able to piece together that Trump directed Cohen to lie via text messages, emails, and other documents. And I read that and I was like, really? Like Trump is gonna let this impeachment level crime be documented like that in text messages and emails? Like it,
And Trump doesn't. And Trump is famous for not using email.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
So they got an email that does this? Well, not from Trump because he doesn't use email. So what are you talking about?
So someone else wrote, "Hey, Mr. Trump wants you to lie to Congress." Like that didn't make sense. And the fact that Cohen's already pleaded guilty in court about lying to Congress about this, but when he pleaded guilty, he didn't say that I pleaded guilty because Trump told me to lie. He explained that he pleaded guilty because Trump had been saying that he had no business in Russia, and so Cohen just wanted to be consistent with that message. And so Cohen was thinking to himself he was doing Trump a favor, when of course, when actually lying, he made things for himself and for Trump much worse, because it added this cloud of suspicion about it. And Cohen even told Congress that I spoke to Trump about this 3 times. He later admitted that actually that they spoke about this more. But again, how any of this can lead to a Trump-Russia conspiracy, and how then it can be conceivable that Trump would want Cohen to lie about this and tell him to, is just really far-fetched.
I've noticed that there are some people, some of the louder Russiagate pushers like Michael Isikoff, are now speaking more reasonably about it, right? They're being more measured, and he's actually starting to doubt the official narrative. Have you noticed that? And how long do you think it'll take for the rest of the Russiagators to catch on?
Yeah, Isikoff has especially tamped down expectations on the Steele dossier, And in fairness to him, his book Russian Roulette does, give us reasons to be skeptical of the Steele dossier. Not as if I think we needed any reasons, because it was so stupid on its face, but he has been saying that he doesn't think that its most salacious allegations will pan out. And I think he's reading the tea leaves. I think he gets that. I mean, after 2 years, no indictments having to do with a conspiracy between Trump and Russia, and no indictments even about the 2016 election. Everything is either for before the election when it comes to Manafort and his dealings in Ukraine, or afterwards when it comes to process crimes over the course of Mueller's investigation. So I think, for anybody who takes journalism remotely seriously, it's getting pretty difficult to sustain this conspiracy theory. And so, I think especially with debacles like BuzzFeed, people, and as Steve was asking, like why would the Washington Post go with this if they've been pushing this narrative? Well, it's getting impossible not to. For example, in this case, Mueller denied it, right? So how can you not, jump on this when Mueller is even denying this explosive story, which he's never done before? So it's pretty much impossible to ignore. And
But they're still doing. First of all, BuzzFeed's standing by this story. They're still standing by, right?
They are. They are. Yeah. Because this whole Russiagate culture has incentivized a cult-like conspiracy theory thinking. So even in the face of Robert Mueller denying your story, even in the face of that Washington Post report you quoted saying that Mueller's denial covered the core aspects of the story, even in the face of BuzzFeed's own reporters being caught saying different things. Jason Leopold said that they have seen documents. Anthony Cormier said that they haven't seen documents. Like they made these statements within hours of each other on cable news. So their story is not even straight. even in the face of that, they're still standing by it. And it's unfortunately Russiagate has incentivized this. It's people are choosing subconsciously. I don't think it's conscious. They're choosing subconsciously to go with the narrative rather than go with the facts.
So I just want to. The thing is, this isn't unique. This has been happening almost monthly, if not weekly, for 2 years. This big, huge bombshell, a story that we got him. Walls are closing in on Trump. The walls are closing in. And this is a tipping point. And bombshell, and then oh, by the way, we had the wrong date on the email. Oh, by the way, Mueller says it's not true. Oh, by the way, Russians didn't invade the Vermont power grid. Oh, by the way, the Russians didn't invade 21 elections in states. Oh, by the way, that story never gets reported with the fanfare as the original headline does, right? So now everybody's still, I guarantee you, half the country's still walking around thinking they got Trump lying to Congress. He ordered Cohen to lie. It said Buzzfeed's in it. They stand by it. Everybody repeated it. And so we won't ever see punishment, and that bothers me. And I know exactly why that bothers me, because I get punished for telling the truth. They don't even get punished for pushing a conspiracy for 2 years. That's why it bothers me. Does it bother you, Aaron?
It does, but this is where we have to put, or at least I try to put some faith in the power of common sense. And as we've seen, Jimmy, I don't know about you, but it's like, I've seen the people who follow me and who watch my work, I've seen a shift. I think people have become more open-minded to the possibility that this conspiracy theory they've been fed is not going to pan out, and that after 2 years it's not happening. So I mean, whether or not, like, the reason pundits and cable news hosts are in the position that they're in is because their job is there to protect privilege and to toe the establishment line. So no matter how much the facts undermine them, their commitment is not to being truthful and not to going with the facts. Their commitment is to peddling whatever the fashionable establishment trend is. So it doesn't matter what the facts are going to do. I'm concerned with how how audiences are going to react, and I have faith in common sense and in the integrity of viewers. And that's why it's important that there are voices like yourself speaking out, because when you put the two side by side, and those interviews I did, are just one example of that. Like I interviewed 2 Russiagate peddlers, and they couldn't defend their positions, and they can't because they're not supported by the facts.
Not only could they not defend their positions, but they hung up on you in a huff both times. Jim Risen and Luke Harding. And go ahead, Steve-O has a question for you. Go ahead,
Aaron, so a lot of this stuff reminds me of the run-up to the war in Iraq. There were these explosive bombshell stories about yellow cake uranium.
Yes.
And how, I forget, one of the hijackers met with Saddam Hussein's agents in Germany.
Atta.
Atta met with agents in Germany. All that kind of stuff. And those were, even then at the time, there were whispers of, doesn't sound right. And there was some speculation that was not true, but the mainstream narrative just kind of powered through all of that. Do you see the similar parallels here? And can you tell us, I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, but whatever happened to those journalists and those outlets who had all these ridiculous reports coming from, before the Iraq war? Was there any punishment to those guys? Was there any consequence of their bad reporting? And if there wasn't, and I suspect that there wasn't, is that another reason why they're doing it again? Because there's no incentive to have a measured tone. You have every incentive to be sensational, because if you're right, you get credit for being the first to be right. But if you're wrong, there's no downside. So why not just amp it up and be irresponsible? Because there's just no downside to it.
Exactly right. It's a system that incentivizes credulity and conformity. And the consequence, to answer your question, is that these failed journalists who went along with the Iraq war got kicked upstairs. They failed upwards. Jeffrey Goldberg was writing stories for the New Yorker magazine, all peddling the Al Qaeda Saddam Hussein conspiracy theory. Where is he now? He's the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic magazine. David Frum wrote the Axis of Evil speech. He's now a venerated member of the resistance. He writes for the Atlantic. You see him on MSNBC all the time, on CNN, treated as if he's a serious person. Nicole Wallace, she was a communications director for the George W. Bush administration. She now hosts a show on MSNBC. So the lesson of the Iraq War is stark. That not only if you fail, if you peddle, one of the biggest catastrophes of in recent memory, certainly one of the biggest crimes in recent memory. Not only are there not negative consequences, you're actually rewarded. You get a promotion.
And I really wish that this Russiagate would go away, just so people could, because once Nicole Wallace stops talking about how bad Trump is, people who watch MSNBC will realize that she's a right winger and she's their enemy. But that probably isn't going to happen, because they're not going to stop talking about Russiagate until Trump's out of office.
Well, and the problem there though is that the Democrats, which MSNBC is basically there to promote, they've drifted so far to the right, at least the party leadership has, that there'll be plenty of Democrats for her to promote as well.
Yeah, you're right. You are correct. Now they're going to get him on money laundering. I'm guessing it wouldn't be too hard to catch these guys doing nefarious financial dealings, right? Because they're all doing nefarious, including Tony Podesta, John Podesta's brother, was also not registering as a foreign agent. So that's the kind of stuff they're getting these people on. And this is what you put a special process. So people go, well, look at all the crimes that Mueller's uncovering around Trump. You put a special prosecutor on anybody, they're going to find lots of crimes. And as you already pointed out in this segment, their crimes, none of them have to do with the election. They all have to do with before the election, or some kind of financial crime that have nothing to do with Russia or collusion or anything. So again, this is why they got rid of the special prosecutor after Bill Clinton. They put a special prosecutor on Bill Clinton to uncover crimes about a land deal, and lo and behold, 6 years later, we were talking about a blowjob and stains on a dress. That's what happens when you put it in. You give me a man and I'll find the crime, and that's exactly what happens in Washington. You put a prosecutor on anybody, they're going to find a crime, and so now people are going to say, "Oh, this investigation has been successful. Look at all the indictments and guilty pleas. Why are they pleading guilty?" What do you say to those people?
Well, first of all, I'm not even sure that they're going to get Trump on money laundering. I can tell you that someone who I really trust, who I consider well informed, has told me that Mueller's already looked at Trump's tax returns and that they didn't have anything there. Now, that's just one person telling me that, so who knows? But I think I'm sure Trump has been involved in money laundering, but then whether the evidence will rise to the level of being worthy of prosecution is another matter. I mean, I'm not even convinced of that. And in terms of, but say they do catch him on money laundering, and if someone were to say, well, it was all worth it. Well, exactly, like it's like that Clinton precedent is a good one. Do we wanna, as progressives, co-sign this precedent where for any president who we don't like, we're gonna throw a special prosecutor at them, like they did with Clinton, and then drag the country into years and years of obsessing over like trivial things like the Monica Lewinsky affair, and now dragging into a conspiracy theory? We're convincing ourselves that Trump is a Russian asset. So is this how we want our politics to play out down the line? And I personally don't think that's the way to oppose Trump. The way to oppose Trump is to beat him on his policies, which are horrible, but unfortunately we don't talk about, because the establishment choice has been to put the focus on Russiagate. So yeah, I mean, even if there is some kind of outcome where Trump gets indicted, though, why then we welcome a President Pence in his place is beyond me. But even there, I just think that it's co-signing a pretty dangerous precedent that I think could be used to hurt a future president who maybe the establishment at that point decides that they don't like either for different reasons than Trump. Maybe because at that point that progressive is too progressive.
So before we let you go, I just want to go over Glenn Greenwald's article really fast. He had 10 examples of bombshell stories that were reported breathlessly and then had to be walked back or fully retracted. And I'll just read them to you and we'll make quick comments. The first one was Donald Trump Jr. was offered advance access to the WikiLeaks email archive. That was reported by CNN and MSNBC. Do you remember that story?
The funniest thing about that is that both these networks independently confirmed the story on their own. Independently confirmed the story that Donald Trump Jr. had received the WikiLeaks emails before they came out. Turns out he got them after they came out. So in other words, when everybody else got them.
Yeah.
And they never explained how both these networks independently confirmed this ultimately false story.
And so the theory then is that they got this bogus information from the same person, both of these news networks, right? That's the theory, that they both got it from the same person?
It's a great question. I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
like I don't know how many people are feeding these networks bad information, but given how many debunked stories there are, there seem to be a lot.
So the second one is Robert Mueller possesses internal emails and witness interviews proving Trump directed Cohen to lie to Congress. That's the one we just debunked.
Yeah.
Okay, number 3, CNN explicitly lied about Lanny Davis being its source for a story whose substance was also false. Cohen would testify that Trump knew in advance about the Trump Tower meeting. So you remember that? What I remember, Lanny Davis was doing a Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney would say things during the run-up to the Iraq War about Saddam having aluminum tubes or weapons of mass destruction to Judith Miller. Judith Miller would then print them on the front page of the New York Times, and then Cheney would go on Meet the Press and go, even the New York Times says it's true. And that's what Lanny Davis was trying to do too, wasn't he? Trying to do that? He was planning a story and then saying, look, CNN reported it.
And what was so negligible about negligent about that story is that CNN said that, or at least one of the outlets that relied on Lanny Davis, is either CNN or the Washington Post, said that Lanny Davis declined to comment in the story, even though Lanny Davis was their unidentified source who gave them the phony information.
So they lied. So
Yeah,
basically,
they lied.
so CNN flat out lied. This isn't a
Yes.
misinterpretation. They flat out lied when they said Lanny Davis wouldn't comment because he was commenting and he was actually their source.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, so that's another one. So this whole, again, number 4, Paul Manafort visited Julian Assange 3 times in the Ecuadorian embassy and nobody noticed. Let me ask you, Aaron, is Paul Manafort actually an invisible man?
You basically have to believe that, yeah.
So
for the story, yeah.
So that was reported by that guy, Luke Harding, who wrote the book Collusion, but didn't have any evidence in the book. And he was one of the guys who hung up on you. And that story's been completely debunked. Paul Manafort visited Julian Assange. The establishment is so crazy with Russiagate that then Politico then put a story in their magazine, Politico magazine, written by an anonymous CIA person who said that if Luke Harding, who wrote that story, got it wrong, it was because the Russians tricked him into getting it wrong.
Exactly, because Luke Harding is on the Russians' case, so this probably means that the Russians planted this to discredit Luke Harding.
Yes,
as if Luke Harding had any credibility before this story.
Right, exactly. Number 5, Trump created a secret internet server to covertly communicate with the Russian bank. That was in Slate. That didn't happen. I remember that. Remember, oh, there's a ping. There's a ping coming from a ping. And oh, you guys are so disgusting. Number 6, Russia attacked this is my new favorite. Russia attacked US diplomats, i.e. spies, at the Cuban embassy using a super sophisticated sonic microwave weapon. That was reported by NBC, MSNBC, and of course the CIA. Now, that didn't happen. It turned out it was crickets.
It was likely crickets, and so far there have been crickets from the corporate media in correcting the story. Let me say, Jimmy, quickly about that bank server story.
Yeah,
there was recently this story was recently revived in the New Yorker, big cover story, like big feature story on the fact that this claim that Trump's Tower was communicating with Alpha Bank, this Russian bank. And it turns out, I learned from the story that the source of it originated with a group of internet guys who are on the internet who deem themselves, quote, the self-appointed guardians of the internet. Okay?
So it started with guys who are supposed protecting us from fake news?
A bunch of guys who see themselves as the guardians of the internet. I don't know how they exactly see themselves that way, but it's like a crew of computer experts who monitor the internet for spam and for weird things. And somehow they came up with this theory, which then made its way to the Senate. It was investigated. The FBI investigated.
Really?
It's totally discredited, but yet it's fueled. So it's fueled not just news stories, but even a Senate investigation. I mean, that's how insane Russiagate has gotten.
Okay, wow. All right, so number 7, Trump aide Anthony Scaramucci is involved in a Russian hedge fund under Senate investigation. That was reported by CNN. I think somebody got fired for that story. It was so bad.
3 CNN reporters had to resign because of that story.
Yeah, three of them. Number 8, a new deranged anonymous group declares mainstream political sites on the left and right to be Russian propaganda. Outlets and Washington Post touts its report to claim massive Kremlin infiltration of the internet. Was that prop or not story? Is that what he's referring to?
That was prop or not. And this anonymous group, we have no idea who they are, who funds them. They made a list of sites that they see as outposts of Russian disinformation, and it was all these. The list includes many progressive sites. Were you on there, Jimmy?
I was upset that I wasn't on there. I'm like, why am I not on there?
You didn't make it.
I know, but anybody who was ever on RT was on there, right? They even had Abby Martin on there. She hasn't done a show there for 3 years.
Yeah, Black Agenda Report. I think Truth Dig. I mean, all like lefty alternative sites.
Yeah.
And I mean the list of embarrassing stories is just endless, and that one has a special place in it.
Well, it has a special place because it's absolutely no sourcing whatsoever. Yeah. Even the organization won't tell you who the hell they are. And Washington Post, they went right ahead and printed it anyway. Why? Yeah. Because it furthered their narrative, the establishment narrative. And again, there's no price to pay. If it's wrong, who cares? It's wrong in the right way.
Exactly.
So number 9, Russian hackers, and this was my favorite at the time. Russian hackers invaded the U.S. electricity grid to deny Vermonters heat during the winter. That was in the Washington Post. I'm pretty sure that story is still up. Actually, I haven't checked it lately, but it was up for a while. And so what they said was that Russia actually invaded the power grid in Vermont, and it was it was reported, and then it was immediately debunked. And go ahead, Rob. You remember that story, right?
Yeah. It was debunked, and they did put up an editor's note that pretty much undermines the entire story.
Yes. By the way, this isn't true, but we're going to leave it up anyway. And the last one is number 10. Remember the story that said RT hacked into and took over C-SPAN? Do you remember that?
Yeah, that's right. There was a moment when C-SPAN was airing, and all of a sudden it switched to RT before it later switched back to C-SPAN, and everyone was like, "Oh my God." RT is hacked into C-SPAN and is airing its Russian propaganda. It turned out to be some kind of transmission failure where like some signals got crossed or something like that, But it's, and there's so many more. Yeah.
We really appreciate we're up against a break. Well, we thank you for taking your time. Everybody check out Aaron's writing in The Nation magazine. He's on top of this story and he's got better inside information than anybody. So thank you very much, Aaron. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed this free clip of aggressive progressives on the Young Turks. This is just a preview of what you will receive with TYT membership. That means exclusive interviews, panel discussions, and more of Jimmy, and of course, me. If you like what you saw, you can access full episodes of Aggressive Progressives by becoming a member. Head to tyt.com/join now.